All right, lads, we're back here for another week. I was missing last week. Warm weather training like the Kerry team, much needed, I have to say. But so we're going to discuss the games from last weekend. Obviously, the two big ones from my personal point of view. Anyway, Kerry, obviously Mayo, Galway, Tyrone, and then we had obviously Clare, Donegal, and Sligo and Kildare. So. There was a few good ones. Stevie, how's the form, man? How are you getting on?
Yeah, not too bad, Enda. First and foremost, congratulations on winning the last week.
We're back to this again, all right? We're back here again.
I did say at the start of the year they look good. Look, and be honest with you, like I was looking back on the game reflection. Actually, I've done a piece this week on the game actually, and I have to say, me and you have had this discussion about Mayo. On the show previous years, I definitely think that they've evolved a little bit under McStay, right? There's no doubt about it. I think McStay has evolved as a manager as well. McStay's last foray into management obviously was with Roscommon, and there was probably a level of naivety, about some of their performances defensively. I know from writing in the article, like they shipped some big scores. I think there was like a 228 shipped against Dublin in one of the games, and I think what he realised as he's come back into management, and what he's realised is that forwards win games and defence wins championships, and I think Mayo 100% have become so much more destructive defensively. That they're a real different animal defensively. They're getting a lot of bodies behind the ball very quickly. You're a man who's a lot more versed in speaking about James Horan than I am. But under James, I suppose there was an element of high press. There was an element of press the ball at its source, press it high, press it hard, and I suppose when you come up against a team who were as systematic and methodically coached as Dublin, and it was only going to end one way, unfortunately, for Mayo in those games. And game management and a defensive template out of possession was probably the two things that maybe let, that Mayo team down a little bit. They were a wonderful team. They were a phenomenal fucking side to watch. Great entertainment for the neutral, I suppose, at times. But I do think this particular group looks to be a little bit more stubbornness defensively when they're out of possession of the ball. Like, they were getting bodies behind the ball. They were scrambling hard. Their game management against Kerry was much better. And Kerry on the flip side, were going after Mayo hard. And probably, one of the things that I identified this week in my article as well is they're missing that midfield general. Conor Glass's role for Derry is invaluable. People have this perception of Glass and driving forward and kicking scores, but actually defensively, Glass is just so smart. He's so astute. He picks up little pockets of space. He cuts out so many attacks. He breaks down so many different attacks. He's a vital cog in their engine, and I suppose if you go back to the Dublin 6 in a row team, there was nobody as unplayable as Brian Fenton in those teams. And from a midfield perspective, David Moran's a massive loss for Kerry. A massive loss. I think they have an issue at 6 as well. I'm not sure if they're really set on a centre half back, but they're definitely missing that midfield general. But for me, Mayo at the weekend looked very, very well organised.
I'll pick that point there, Sammy, with 6. Tadhg Molly obviously got whipped off probably in the early 60 minutes. Now, Jack has stuck with them since his tenure started last year. Tadhg Molly has been a mainstay at 6. So that's an interesting kind of scenario there. Yeah. Why do you think why are you saying that, basically?
Well, I think they're shipping a lot of scores. They're shipping a hell of a lot more scores than they were in previous years. Particularly last year when Paddy Tally came in, and introduced, what Kerry did last year, and it was Kerry prided themselves on a really, 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 tight defensive unit, real, defensive intensity, pride themselves on clean sheets. They lost 4 National League games this year. Now, we had this conversation on the show. They were absolutely hammered by Mayo. They were well beaten by Tyrone. They were beaten by a Donegal team who never won another game. They were beaten by Monaghan on the last day. Or sorry, Mayo were beaten by Monaghan. Sorry, on the last day. But Kerry, the Monaghan game actually was the one game where Kerry showed some sort of green shoots of previous form. Actually, apologies, but the 4 games that Kerry lost in the National League, and it really, really, really started to ring alarm bells for me. Now, they won a facile Munster Championship. They beat a Tipperary team who were beaten at the weekend by 16 points by Down. So they also beat a Clare team in the final, and Clare also lost to Donegal at the weekend. So
yeah,
it's nearly like a horse running in a later race. When you look at the form and you think, well, he's running in a higher grade than that, so he must be running a lesser race here. Like, you're looking at those teams that Kerry beaten. The Munster Championship probably give everyone a sort of a false reading of where Kerry are, because let's be honest, Enda, the Munster Championship is defunct. It's defunct as a competition, along with Leinster. There's still a glimmer of hope in Connacht, because the three teams obviously are quite evenly matched on any given day. Ulster is still very, very attritional and still very, very exciting this year. But the Munster Championship, for me, it probably didn't do Kerry any favours. That's the bottom line. Because when you're preparing for a game, you lose crucial time, crucial prep time, So I do believe that they're maybe looking at the scores that they're shipping. They're looking at how they're being exposed offensively. But sometimes, and this is the thing, Kerry spent a lot of time last year facing the game, having the game played in front of them, scrambling hard, getting bodies back. This year they seem to be chasing the game a lot. So they're, rather than facing, they're chasing. And when a team is doing that on a consistent basis, it's only going to end one way,
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll say, like, to me, the last day, like, Mayo's athleticism around the middle third, Kerry couldn't live with that. You said the midfield issue there. Look, usually in any setup, O'Connor, he's still very young. Jack Barry, they're still number twos. In a county midfield, there's always that number one personality, that kind of general at midfield, and I just don't think them two boys have the personality. They're kind of like, I'm not trying to disrespect anyone here, but it feels like they're number two midfielder in a county team, and they're missing, as you said, that big personality in the David Moore, who obviously retired last year. And he I remember even last year coming on against Cork in the first round of the championship, they were in trouble that game. David Moore came on after 50 minutes, caught 4 or 5 balls, primary ball, and drove them on and got them over the line that game. Like, so I'm looking at the subs that came on. I'm looking here, and I'm just thinking, like, that Jack hasn't introduced any new blood, any fresh blood. Now, again, I don't know, is there any new blood to be introduced here? But, like, it's the same. It seems like it's the same team. Like, Mayo, absolutely. Like, when you see Mayo's bench coming off the last day, it was Paddy Durkin, Enda Hession, Tommy Conroy, Owen McLaughlin, and Stephen Cohen. Like, maybe not Stephen Cohen, the exception to that, but them 4 boys, they're like greyhounds when they get ahead of the steam here. So Kerry could not live with that. So, like, seeing, like, they don't have, this is Kerry's full team here, Stevie. So, like, I'm struggling to see here where the improvement is going to come. Is it a second year syndrome here in terms of the hunger isn't there what it was? Obviously, Jack came in last year, his first year. Obviously, the hunger, freshness was about the setup here. Like, so, I'm struggling to see where Kerry are going to improve here.
Yeah, well, look, you mentioned the word second year syndrome, and this is an interesting one, okay? I looked at the statistics there over the last 33 years. So take 33 years. 33 years takes us back to 1990, okay?
Yeah.
Cork won the All-Ireland in 1990. They also won it in 1980. So if we start with Cork in 1990, from Cork in 1990 to Kerry in 2020, 2 counties have retained the All-Ireland. Yeah. Kerry in 06 and 07. Yeah. And the one-off, Dublin 6 in a row team that we'll probably never see again at that caliber, 6 in a row. Out of the other 25 winners, no one ever managed to retain it back to back. And so it does go to show you that the competition, the Sam Maguire is ultimately a very, very difficult competition to win back to back. People come in with different hungers. Mayo are obviously starving for success, mad to break that glass ceiling. You have Derry, who have obviously evolved over the number of years. You have Armagh, who are probably looking on the outside thinking, we're close to Derry, we're close to Galway. Jesus, we were only beat by a point by Kerry. Mayo, we drew a Mayo in the athletic grounds. How far away are we? They're looking from the outside. Tyrone are probably on the way down. We'll chat about that obviously later. Galway will fancy their chances of winning All Ireland this year, and ultimately, the team that's motoring along now and no one's really talking about is Dublin, and they're going to be thereabouts. So it is for me this year, and unquestionably the most open All Ireland I think we've had in a long, long time. You know, it really, really is. Like, and I think it's very, very hard to retain that hunger and that consistency. The other thing to remember as well is, you know, the Cliffords were coming in this year, having had a long season with Kerry, a long season with Fossa. Like everyone talk about all these games that David Clifford played, like that's got to take its toll mentally, physically, psychologically. You know, the same as Shane Walsh. All these games that you're playing at club level, at county level, you're in the game cycle. You know, you're not getting an opportunity to do any strength training or any, you know, prehab or off-season work. You're literally going just from season to season to season to season, and that can take its toll. And obviously, there's a downtime, there's a partying time, there's a holiday time, there's a lack of pre-season. We bring the boys back in January. We'll tick through the National League. Their National League form was concerning, and this is one thing we said on the show as well. You know, because of the condensed season, you don't get those 5 to 6 week gaps between games anymore, where you can go away, do a little mini pre-season, have a little training camp. And Kerry were probably victims as well, you know, from the point of view being that they won their provincial title, albeit they only had to play 2 games, but they're still in that game cycle. When Kerry were preparing for Clare or Kerry were preparing for Tip, they weren't thinking of Mayo. But Mayo were sitting for 5 or 6 weeks thinking of Kerry. And that's the difference. And that's the difference for me, you know.
What's the last thing? What impressed you most about Mayo?
I just think their defensive intensity without the ball. Their organisation as well. You know, Mayo have never had an issue, and you know this as well. They've never had an issue getting scores. They've never had an issue putting up big scores against the better sides. Mayo's issue has probably been a game management perspective, or, you know, possibly from a defensive point of view, being a little bit open. But for me, you know, their ability to scramble really hard, getting goal side. I think they have a defensive organisation this year that they've never had before. You know, a real high level of organisation. I go back to the All Ireland final, Enda, where they played Dublin in the COVID year, and I remember the clip very, very particularly from behind the goals, where Dublin wide. And actually, the 2 Dublin players were actually doing an illegal move in Gaelic football. They actually went off the pitch. You're actually not allowed to leave the pitch and come back against in an open play. But the 2 players, I think Dean Rock and someone else, I think it was Colin O'Callaghan, I think possibly, and they had gone off the pitch. And the 2 Mayo defenders actually followed them. You know, nearly were touch tight. Were nearly standing off the pitch. They were defending that naively at the time. You know, but I just think this year, you know, watching their National League games, watching that game against Kerry, there definitely is a defensive platform there and a defensive organisation that I feel is gonna have Mayo there in July.
Yeah, and when you think about it too, like, but obviously Leroy retired, and Rushy Mullen is getting his first start for Geelong this year. Like, you know, two kind of that type of caliber players have gone this year, and they seem to be, you know, is it the thing, obviously, Stephen, like when you come in, management coming in for the first year, it's that first year bounce, like, do you know what I mean? Like, is it like we're witnessing here Mayo's first year with McStay and Jacko's for a second year with Kerry? Is it would you know yourself, you've been in setups before between the first and second, can you feel it? Is there a feeling there where you can, you know, kind of feel it within the squad, or you just know, fucking, we're not getting the same bounce here, or, you know, your message isn't getting across as much, or do you ever get that, you know, with your experience?
I don't know if we can, if that's the case or not. Like, you know, I'm sure Kerry have a very, very high performance environment, and they've created a very high performance environment there. But one thing that Mayo has done, probably, you know, the 2 boys probably that have obviously, you know, gone into management this year, you know, that were pundits, you know, Kevin and Colin, for example. And what I noticed, the distinct difference between both management teams is that Kevin has filled his management team with a huge amount of experience and a high caliber level of coaching experience there, with Stephen Rochford, Tony Buckley, you know, behind the scenes. And that's not a fluke, you know, that's not coincidence. Like, you know, he understands that the game is changing. These are 2 boys that have been involved in the game. They're still attached to the game. They still understand how the game's evolving, you know, because the game is evolving at the minute, Enda. The game is changing slightly. The game is changing in the way teams press kickouts. The game is changing in the way teams are looking at their kickouts. The game is changing from an offensive point of view, the way teams are trying to attack. You know, they're trying to add so many different strings to their bows. You know, how they're using the offensive mark, how they're defending. You know, the game's fascinating now, you know, from a tactical point of view. There's so many things happening, and I actually think the game is becoming a lot more open. There's a lot more scores. I think it's becoming a lot more enjoyable. We always sort of criticize stuff, right? So we'll always look at a game and say, geez, that was dire and that was awful and that was rubbish. But like, you watch a soccer match, how many soccer matches are absolutely dire to watch? Like, how many rugby matches so attritional and boring, and and that's the thing about Gaelic. We just think that every single game should be fascinating and brilliant. Like no one could argue, for example, that Armagh Derry in the Ulster final was just exhilarating. It was hugely engrossing. No one wanted to turn it off. Went to extra time. It was mistakes. There was, for example, like if you boil down the couple of incidents in the game, you're looking at a kick out that maybe just went wrong. You're looking at a high catch from glass and then a mark from a whole load of different things that happened in those last few minutes that dictated the outcome of that game. And I think Gaelic football is in a very, very healthy place at the minute, and particularly at the highest level. Like I really do. And I think this year's All Ireland is going to be extremely interesting. But on the Kerry thing, I do believe if you look at Tyrone, how they flopped in 2022. You go back, obviously you can't really compare many years before that because Dublin were obviously there, for 6 years. But if you go pre-Dublin, Donegal 2012, knocked out in 2013 early. Kerry 2014, knocked out in 2015. And it happens, and it happens. Like the players are only human, and like there's only so many times that you can tell a player how hungry are you, how hungry are you. Maybe a lot of those players are just so relieved to get that medal, and they'll get more. That particular Seanie O'Shea, David Clifford, they're going to get more than one All Ireland. Like, let's be honest, like they are. They're going to win more than one All Ireland medal. Like, that's the reality of the situation. It may not be this year, but it could be next year or the year after that or the year after that. But
do you see Kerry getting to the last four?
Well, I think with the format, the way the format is laid out now, absolutely, and if you look at it, like we're going to talk about this, obviously, like the groups for me are a little bit. It's hard to get excited, right? And I missed a bit of football last weekend. I didn't watch it all, right? And probably the reason being is that it's just not really the group format is just not overly enthralling at the present time, right? Because 3 will qualify. If you actually think of it, a team could possibly games, 1 in their provincial championship, 2 in a group, and still go through. They could lose 3 times and still win the All Ireland. And it's a bit mad, but I do believe that Kerry they'll obviously will qualify, and I do believe that they will win a playoff. So what will probably happen is they'll probably finish second in the group, and then they'll win a playoff against the 3rd place team. Because look, if you actually look at Sligo and Kildare's group, there's actually a strong possibility that one team in that group could go through in 1 point.
Yeah.
Which if Sligo and Kildare were both to lose to Roscommon and Dublin, they could go through in 1 point, depending on who loses the least.
Yeah, look at the format we've just discussed in the past. We're not exactly a massive. Look at we said this before. I think the GA obviously they're looking at the end this year and they'll rejig it again like everything else, and there'll be enough people give it out, and they'll have to look at it and they'll have to look at. You're right. It is when you put it like that. The Dublin, Roscommon, Kildare, Sligo group. Obviously, if one team finished at 1 point and going through, it doesn't. Look at personally, my point of view, a 3rd place team should not be going through. It should be the top 2, and that's it, and leave it at that. But again, look at the dark horses. Galway, Tyrone. Obviously, Galway had a good result against them in Pearse Stadium. It was obviously 16-13. Obviously, Frank Burns got sent off. Was a major talking point in the first half. Kind of changed the game. Obviously, Morgan got a black card then as well. So I'm still looking. It was Galway they weren't overly impressive, Stevie, to be honest with you. Obviously, Tyrone are kind of at a crossroads here as well. So it's I would, to be honest, I expected more of Galway. They're my kind of jack horses. Obviously, as a Mayo man, my biggest fear would be them to come through and fucking
Galway. Away, and they'll not be far away. I've thought Galway last year were very, very good. They had a brilliant season last year. I thought this year in the National League, what they really showed as well too, I just remember those celebrations in the athletic grounds from John Devilly and Joyce and the management team. Really, really, like, it was fist clenching stuff. It was fist pumping to the crowd. It was nearly like one of those moments, like, we've become a hardy bunch of pickers here. We've gone to one of the top teams in Ulster here now. We've gone into their own patch, really passionate athletic grounds. We've dug out a win. I've said this to you before. I do have a wee bit of a doubt and a little bit of concern over the goalkeeping situation. I don't like the way they haven't settled on a number one. I don't like the way they bounce between Power and Gleeson. I've said that now for over a year. They're two good keepers, don't get me wrong, two good lads. But I would just like to see a team that's comfortable with the goalkeeper, and particularly at that level. And I think even players, full back line would like to have a presence, knowing that that's the number one from a kick out strategies, different types of kickouts, like even their style of kicking. Power's got a lower stinger kick, a lower trajectory in his kicks. All those things matter, and that's my one concern over them. Just that one concern.
I'll give you a good one here. Obviously, with Mayo, interesting you bring that up, because midfielders do bitch and moan an awful lot, and we'll say we had Clarkey obviously in goal and Robbie Hindley, so the two of their kickouts are completely different, and the midfielders, as you said there, it takes a bit of you getting used to, and obviously, this keeper can do one thing and the other keeper can do another thing. Do you know what I mean? So it's a completely different setup. So it's a good point you're bringing up there in terms of it's a very valid point, because I'm sure the going midfielders and the wing backs and the wing forwards are like, a bit of continuity. Power and Gleeson offer two completely different skill sets here. So it's a very good point here. Like, so they went with Gleeson the last day. It'd be interesting if they stick with him now for the remainder of the championship. Obviously, if you're Gleeson, you're kind of thinking at the back of your head, they don't have the full trust in me here. So it's an interesting look. That could come back to haunt them here. One interesting thing I thought, McDade, there's a certain McDade now wing back. Obviously, they're trying to fit Maher and Connery into midfield. Yeah. Like, obviously want to fit McDade. Like, he's doing very well. He kicked 2 points last day. Yeah. Shane Walsh did well. He had 6 points. He seemed to be back to his semi himself. But again, like, it's go on. Sorry, Stephen, go on.
This is the thing I was going to say. That's the one thing that I think is a positive for Galway. Matthew Tierney was sensational in the Connacht final. Yeah. Now, I know they were playing Sligo, but Sligo were on a wee bit of an up. Obviously they proved at the weekend with the result against Kildare that they can go probably to another level. They're obviously not ready for that level just yet, but they are certainly what you would probably call, I think there's 3 tiers in football, and I would say Sligo have definitely come from tier 3 to the lower edge of tier 2 without a shadow of a doubt. And you look at Galway in the final. Matthew Tierney was brilliant, absolutely sensational. I think he kicked 1-5 or 1-6. I think he was man of the match. But the next day, then, obviously, as you say, Walsh, who was very, very poor in the final, got taken off. I know there was talk about having a flu or something. He popped up with 6 against Tyrone, and I think they've got that in their locker end where they're not heavily reliant now on one man. They're not heavily reliant on Shane to kick 7 or 8 or 9 points. Matthew Tierney can pop up. Finnerty can come off the bench or start. Comer can pop up with scores. Conroy can pop up from the middle of the field. They've multiple avenues for scores, which is going to be ultimately needed. Come the business end, when it gets down to the nitty gritty, you're going to need that flexibility and you're going to need that strength and depth. To obviously not to be relying on that one marquee forward, and that is why for me, Kerry and Dublin, just a little bit of concern that Clifford and Con take those 2 out, and is there that real mad threat coming from a numerous amount of sources? I don't know.
Yeah, you're looking at it now, like from the, like Mayo got into third favourites here with the bookies. Kerry got still at number 2, and I think Dublin number 1 here. But Kerry, it was kind of in my head. It was Kerry and Dublin slightly ahead of Galway and Mayo. But now you nearly flipped that around, CB. To be honest with you, like with the results going the way they've been going, Dublin weren't that. They haven't been overly impressive in the Leinster Championship. It'd be interesting how they get on against Roscommon now next week to really have a, I know it's in Croke Park, but they'll obviously Kildare put it up to Dublin. It'd be interesting how that goes now. But just again, as you said, game management. I still think Galway are ahead of Mayo in terms of game management. Mayo are getting better. Mayo are getting better. Don't get me wrong here, but as you know yourself, it'll come down to the last 5-10 minutes in the crunch, the last 4 semi-final, final stages. It'll come down to the last 10 minutes, and that coaching, that fucking game management, that creating that high percentage shot will get them over the line. So I just hope Mayo have learned and can bridge that gap. But we shall see. We shall see. The other two games, Clare Donegal, Sligo Kildare. Just Sligo Kildare first. 14 points apiece. I thought Sligo came back in that game. Niall Murphy kicked an absolute boomer to.
Brilliant footballer. Brilliant.
Yeah, unbelievable. And it's nice to see him getting some record. Carabine as well, the centre forward from Sligo, is a really, really good footballer as well. Was this a positive result for Kildare, or what do you think?
No, well, like Division 2 versus Division 4, obviously before the promotion, it's 2 versus 4. Now I know it was an away game for Kildare, but it's still very, very disappointing. It was a wee bit of the Kildare of old, Enda. We have chatted about maybe having a little bit of a flaky mentality. Obviously that consistency to go to Croke Park, to put in that shift against Dublin and then to concede the exact same amount of scores against Sligo. They only conceded 14 points against Dublin. They conceded the exact same against Sligo, who obviously don't pose the same level of offensive threat that Dublin have, and you've just got to be asking questions over maybe that mentality. Was there a complacency in playing Sligo? Obviously Tony's done a brilliant job with them. He has them pumping. They're flying. Their 20s went well this year, but like Kildare should have been the flip side of it. The exact same. Their under 20s won an All Ireland title. The county's on the rise. They've got a lot of young talent coming through. There's a couple of players playing in that team, obviously, as well, that obviously likes Jimmy Cahill and guys like that who have won under 20 titles themselves when Davy Burke was the manager. And this is the thing, like the footballers are there. I just don't know what is wrong. And I'm not people in Kildare think I have something like against them or something personally, but I don't. I actually just feel that they're a county that's massively, massively underachieving. I think it's a giant just waiting to be awoken. I really do. I fully believe that Kildare football is a giant waiting to be awoken, and with the talent that county has, the athleticism of some of those players, and I just don't know what's missing. I do not know what's missing. And I just felt that we're in such a strong winning position late in the game, to throw that away. It's just got to be question marks over him, and that for me is ultimately where it lies. That, like, can you honestly remember Newbridge or Nowhere? Was that the last time that they won a really significant game? In a real tight match, late moments, clutch moments. I can't remember Kildare winning a really tight, crucial game. You sense that? Genuinely can't. Genuinely can't.
And their fan base are absolutely fanatical. Remind me of the Mayo supporters, to be honest with you. They really I thought Kevin O'Callaghan, number 6 for Kildare, he in fairness to him, you can't put him in. And Derek Kerwin, I thought, played well as well for them. Look, if Kildare don't come out of this group, like, you'd have to, when you're looking at this group from the start, like, it'd be a huge, as you said, Division 2, Division 4 there. If Kildare don't come out of this group now, it's an absolute travesty.
It could come down to, this is mad, like, but it actually could come down to who loses the least between Sligo and Dublin. Who loses the least. I know that sounds a bit silly, but they both are going to be in 1 point. I think Roscommon will beat Sligo, and I think Roscommon will beat Kildare. So it could come down to, it could perceivably come down to score difference, obviously, because both teams drew. So one team could possibly go through in 1 point. And look, I'm sure Sligo wouldn't turn down the opportunity of playing another game, against a team of higher quality, obviously, because it'll help them on their trajectory next year to try and stay in Division 3 and establish themselves in Division 3 for a season or two.
Just the last game, well, the Donegal, Clare game, Donegal.
Massive win for Donegal. Massive win. Badly needed. Donegal have good footballers, like, and I watched them that day in Newry, like, and like Owen Ban Gallagher and big Langan pulled up that a hamstring injury. He pulled his hamstring. Oisín Gallen obviously is a brilliant footballer. You know, Donegal have some brilliant footballers. Over the last number of years, they've been consistently bringing through players on a regular basis. You know, obviously the style of football that Donegal play, you know, it is a very attritional style. It's very defensive. There's it's a very high possession based football. But club football in Donegal is actually got into, and I don't know. I know there's an old myth that the weather in Donegal, because so many of the matches are played, you know, on the north coast, on the northwest, with heavy winds, and you know, a lot of pitches like the Raha and pitches like that along the shore. You know, like it probably actually pays to play a short hand passing game, you know, through the hands. And that's the way Donegal play football. That's the style of football. They have long bouts of possession, you know, trying to create scoring chances, that opportunity. But for me, it's a massive win psychologically for them. The county was in a very, very low ebb. I think if Clare had beaten them, it would have been an ultimate disaster for them, you know. And Clare was possibly the best game they probably could have hoped for in that group. The mad thing is, as bad a season that Donegal have had, they could possibly beat Derry or Monaghan, because Ulster football is like that. You know, Ulster football is just so attritional. Derry play Monaghan this week. Who knows what will happen in that game? Who knows the impact of not having Gallagher around is going to have for Derry? That's obviously going to be a huge factor, whether people like it or not. It's going to be a massive factor for them. You know, him not being there, you know, is obviously maybe the camp are happy that it's done and dusted now and that they can move on. But you know, he's obviously going to be, you know, a miss for them from that perspective along the line. So you know how this game's going to go. Whether Monaghan have a possibility of really, really lifting their game after having beaten Derry. Now this is the flaw in the system for me. Monaghan played Derry in the National League, played Derry in the first round of the Ulster Championship. Their next game now is Derry, right? Take Division 4. Carlow played Wicklow in the National League, played them in the Leinster Championship, and played them in the Tailteann Cup. You know, there's flaws, and there's massive flaws.
That group there is like a mini Ulster with Monaghan, Derry, Donegal in it. Like it's like a fucking mini Ulster Championship.
And like, I know I get a bit of stick the last time for a wee throwaway comment I made about Waterford or whatever, right, and about the Tailteann Cup, but it genuinely is. It just, for me, like, there's 3 tiers. There's at least 3 tiers in football. And I know I might laugh. There's probably 4 tiers. The National League is our 4 tiers. Like, there's four divisions in the National League. There's a reason why there's 4 divisions. Everyone's playing at their own level. Why do we go from a National League into another mini league where the teams are playing the same opposition that they're going to be playing in the National League? It doesn't make sense. Like, it does not make sense. Like, because we have 32 teams. I've said this every bloody week. And we're like, the world. You know, the laugh is in it, right? In the World Cup, it'll start off with 200 nations. The Champions League will start with 190 clubs, all looking to wean themselves down to that last 32. We have fucking 32. And we're just trying to find so many obscure ways. We have 32, but we are still managing to have 2 competitions where you're into the last 12. It's absolute madness. It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. You know what I think? It's just stupidity in the highest order. It's madness. It really is.
Look at. I know, yeah, well, I forgot you started me here all night. Look at, I have to agree with you, to be honest with you. Look at, just, we'll run through the, actually, before we move on, again, controversial comments. What did you make of the altercation with the Dunlog and Joanne kind of altercation? That was a bit. Actually, I seen your comment on Twitter. You were saying that you were like, you know, it's definitely what you call it.
It's all about
staged.
It's all about clicks now, and like, do you know what I mean? It's all about.
Do you think that was staged? Do you think that was staged?
Sure, but it's all about. It's all about, like, the way social media is now, and the way, you know, TV is now, RT. It's all about ratings. You know, it's all about ratings. Yeah. So let's create something controversial to give us the rating. Let's speak about something controversial. So I'll put him on the spot. I do believe there was an element of it being staged, like, you know, and when Joanne was completely prompting what she was like, she's prompting what to say, like, you know, she's not just making it up off the cuff, like, she's obviously being told pre-show, go after this, go after that, go after here, go after him, or go after her, and that's just the way RTE are, you know. I personally have said this a number of times in the show, Enda, right? I think the punditry in general is very, very poor on the show. Would we be better served losing that 20 minutes of waffle and just showing more football or more hurling? Absolutely. You're talking about promoting the game or advertising the game. A quick snippet from someone to say, yeah, brilliant game, whatever, great stuff. But don't just lose the analysis and just have more coverage. Like some of the level of respect that's shown to some counties is horrific. Like, and we're talking about trying to promote and develop the game. Like nobody loves nothing more, and you're a player. Like players love going home on a Sunday or whatever and seeing their county. Supporters love seeing their county getting 6-7 minutes of highlights on the Sunday game rather than like 13 seconds or 28 seconds and then having to listen. Like, Enda, let's call it spade a spade. There was a debate a number of weeks ago on the Sunday game, which lasted for about 7 or 8 minutes, on whether there was a drink culture in the GAA or not. And the mother of God, I never heard more nonsense like it in my life. I can't remember. I think Lee Keegan was in the show with someone else. I can't remember what it was, but like
it was Paul Flynn.
What? God, like what in the name of God? And drink culture and this and that and that. Oh Jesus! Like just.
I will play. I'm not devil. Well, I don't know if it's devil's advocate or not, but like in fairness, Lee and Flynn, I'm presuming they have no say. RT are coming up with the topics here, Stevie. Is it? Obviously, they're giving their opinion and all that.
It must be. But for me, there's no drink culture in the GA. There's no drink culture in the GA because I can tell you now for a fact, right? There's no drink culture in the GA. I'll tell you what's a bigger problem in the GA. Gambling's a bigger problem in the GA, right? Gambling's rife in society. It's a major, major problem in the GA. But I can tell you this fact, right? See young lads now. Young lads now are more likely to go for a coffee than go for a drink. That's the way society's gone. Young people now, because of Instagram, etc., they're more body conscious. They're more conscious about their self, how they look, their self looks. They're in the gym. They're doing more S&C than they've ever done before. There's more education around nutrition, hydration, and diet. That is absolute nonsense about a drink culture in the GA. It's absolutely pathetically because lads go for a few pints after they get beat in the championship, maybe have a Monday club or whatever. Jesus, mother of God, let people live and enjoy themselves. Like that was one of the most nonsense. But that's the way the show has gone, and like it's.
I have a good one for you. Back in 2012, we got fucking hockeyed by Donegal in the league, and it was up in Donegal. It wasn't Ballybuffet now, but it's somewhere. I'm not sure where it was, but we came down anyway, and we had a session on the Sunday, and a few boys went on the Monday session, and it was on the Mayo News that the Mayo squad are on the pier on the Monday, but like it was fucking like that. People just have a fascination or an obsession over if a lad has a pint, it's literally you're murdering a man. You just cannot. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know obviously there's a balance to it, but like
100%. I've had this conversation before. If you went to any country in Europe and you were sitting there on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday, and people were having a few glasses of wine or a few beers, nobody would raise an eyebrow, like Yeah. But if you've seen a GA player having a pint of beer on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night, or maybe 10 days later or 2 weeks later, Jesus Christ. Party was in the drink for 4 days there. It was unbelievable. And you might be in having a couple of glasses of wine or a few beers with your friends or whatever. So bad. What is the issue? And I'll tell you another thing. You see a team I always used to joke, like a team that drinks together stays together. A team that goes in the drink together and has a brilliant fucking session, a brilliant bonding session, a few pints, a bit of crack. Lads remember that forever. Like they remember them days forever and those nights out and the crack and the banter and the camaraderie. I'll tell you now, life's too serious without fucking delving into the gutters of that there. The people can't go out now and enjoy themselves. Like, oh God.
Right, I go through the Tailteann Cup results. Any surprises here? London 2-6, Kevin 18 points. That was about standard. No
surprises. I think the last four are standing out like a sore thumb. I think it's going to be Cavan, Fermanagh, Meath, and Down, unless they meet each other before that.
Yeah.
That's going to be the last.
Lee Shoffley.
Lee Shoffley. Again, you're into those sort of Leinster teams who are probably, if you could throw a blanket over all the Leinster teams outside of Dublin, and to be honest with you, Meath or Kildare on their day could possibly beat someone, but the majority of Leinster teams on any given day could beat each other any given day.
Carlow, Limerick, Carlow 14, Limerick 119.
Look, Carlo had a great win the first day. I think I said it in the show 2 weeks ago. Carlo have a great record against Wicklow. They had a brilliant record against Wicklow. They drew with Wicklow in the National League. I think there was a bit of talk about it being a huge shock. It wasn't that much of a shock, but Limerick. I'll tell you this now, right? Limerick are a good side. Billy Lee, I know Billy Lee very well. Billy was obviously the manager there for a number of years, and I can tell you this now, and even the size and physicality of that Limerick team, they're a big side, and there's some fine footballers in Limerick. And I was actually chatting to him last year about this. He actually believes that maybe 4 or 5 of the Limerick hurlers would obviously be good enough to play county football as well. And hurling is obviously a major issue for them, from the point of view being that hurling is number 1 in Limerick. And you could possibly perceivably argue that maybe rugby is number 2 down around there, and it's a big rugby county, a big rugby province. And Limerick are obviously, I think personally, are doing very well. To obviously, now I know they're relegated this year, but Division 2 was probably a step too far. But Limerick will hold their own next year in Division 3. They're a fine side, and they might cause a little rumble or two in the Tailteann Cup. They may do.
Yeah, they could be the dark horse actually there. That's actually a decent point. Longford, Wicklow, Longford 317, Wicklow 29. That was a good clip in there by Longford. Wexford and Antrim.
I think is that how one game. We'll make Wicklow a must-win game now against Limerick, but I can't see them beating Limerick. But just probably disappointing for Oisin. I think after promotion, I'm sure he's hoping for a run in the Tailteann.
Wexford 14, Antrim 215. Antrim are going all right, are they?
Antrim have 2 wins. They've played some good challenge games. I said this to you. They played Donegal and they played Dublin. Albeit it was Dublin's second string, but it's still a good challenge. So they obviously were going into the Tailteann Cup with thoughts of progressing and giving it a good go. And why not? And listen, I had this conversation actually with a gentleman last night. Antrim have always historically Enda had really talented footballers, and they still have real talented footballers. And I know the likes of Matt Fitzpatrick's now playing for them. He's playing professional soccer, whatever, semi-professional soccer with Glenavon and stuff. But I remember down a number of years ago to play them. It must be 6 years ago, and looking at the matchups and just having a matchup nightmare, of so many really talented players. The Murrays, Paddy McBride, Fitzpatrick at the time, Matt Fitz at the time, even McGordy was still floating about, real raw talent, and some real big size as well. And Big Nakiba was playing at that time as well, but they've brought through a number of younger players. Obviously, McEntee's there this year. He'll be putting a big emphasis on the Tailteann Cup. Probably sees it as a realistic opportunity to get to Croke Park. I think what all these counties want, Enda, is a semi-final, because a semi-final guarantees you a game at Croke Park. A lot of them down players, believe it or not, a lot of them down players in that squad probably played in Croke Park before for down. A lot of them wouldn't have, and for them to get an opportunity to play in Croke Park will only bring them on as well.
It's annoying. It's just where you're located in the country. Obviously, Leinster teams get that honor of going out in Croke Park. I know we say Imlan Mulligan actually for Leitrim. I don't think he ever played in Croker. Do you know what I mean? So Leitrim, obviously, they lost to Fermanagh 2-7 to 119. Disappointing Leitrim. Obviously, Antrim bet them the last day. Is it probably a New York hangover? You know yourself with. Losing a game like that, squads, the confidence levels drop. It's hard to recover, and that seems to be the case here at Leitrim. Waterford Meath get them a good clip in 317 to 114. Laois and Offaly drew 111 to 111, and then down you gave Tip a good clipping as well, 218 to 6 points. It's look at. You could have a decent point there, Steve, with Limerick being the dark horses here. You're saying that you're saying down. You're saying who for the Cavan, Fermanagh, and you're saying Meath
and Meath,
and possibly Limerick number might sneak in.
Meath will be found out if they play if Meath play the likes of Down in a knockout, or Cavan or Fermanagh, teams that are organised, they'll be beaten
Okay. Just the games. Just a quick games next week. Louth, Cork. How do you see that going? How do you see who's going to come out?
Big game.
It's at home for Louth.
You see, listen, this is a big thing. Obviously, maybe the game will be an RD possibly, you know, and I was actually there this year for a National League game against Derry. It's a lovely venue, you know, a very, very handy venue to get to as well, for supporters and the likes. But RD, Louth have played RD very well this year, and because they play the pitch very well, they know the denominators, the dimensions of the pitch. You know that they're a very, very well organised team defensively. We seen that last week. Obviously, you know, I know Dublin took them apart. Their kick out sort of malfunctioned on them a little bit last week. Obviously, in the Leinster final 2 weeks ago. Sorry, you know, it's a bit kamikaze what they did. You know, from a kick out perspective, leaving themselves so open. But you know yourself, when it comes to a home venue, you know, in the National League or the Championship, it's a major, major advantage. Like, and it's nearly a 4 or 5 point advantage. Like that day Louth played Derry. Louth were very, very close to beating Derry that day. Very, very close. You know.
So home advantage does count. Is an advantage.
No, but I would say home advantage could edge this. You know, Cork are another county that I would have Cork in a similar action to Kildare. Like, you know, majorly disappointing. Like, just something waiting to be a spark waiting to be ignited, you know, and just something just to Cork must be ready to explode. And like, you know, if the right, I don't know what's going. I couldn't even begin to talk. I have no idea what's going on, but it's massive. Kind of that size and population, and you know, Jesus, such underachieving. Like,
yeah. Would you favor? Are you saying Loud? Are you saying Loud there?
Loud and Edge at home, yeah. Loud narrowly.
Armagh, Westmeath at home. Armagh at home. You'd imagine.
Armagh win that comfortably. Like, yeah, I can't see Westmeath winning a game. You know.
Loud. Sorry, Shorty K.
Somebody wrote in the Loud game. Navan, actually.
In Navan. It's in Navan.
Yeah. Loud games in Navan.
RD is obviously too small.
Probably is. Yeah, that's probably what it is. Is. Like, yeah.
Derry Monaghan.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting. As I said, you know, it'll be proper attritional. The game, you know, the last time between the two sides, like it was tight and tense, you know, and it'll be the same again, you know. Listen, I would say probably the high of coming off the back of an Ulster final win, but then again, you know, it's probably taken its toll emotionally on them too. Monaghan have been sitting, probably preparing for this now for a long time. I'll tell you what'll be interesting, and what'll be interesting for me is what the statistics will stand by is on the teams that have, you know, progressed in their provinces against the teams that have been knocked out for a long time and how they factor. And it'll be interesting to see how that sort of weighs up and compares against each other over the next few weeks. You know, a team with an extended break in comparison to a team who have been motoring away playing games. Like, I'll be curious how that goes.
There's no doubt about it that it's been a positive for Mayo. That 6 week break has been a blessing in disguise.
Huge, yeah.
There's no, you know what I mean. Last game of the weekend, Dublin Roscommon. It's in Croker.
Yeah, listen, as much as you'd want, obviously Roscommon, a lot of time for all the lads, great lads. Davy's a good fella too, as well, as you say. Like, it'd be great to see them get a result. Like, but they probably historically haven't had a big result in Croke Park against a top four. Never, you know, and that's obviously a huge psychological noose around their neck. And if they were to pull off a result this weekend, then this time next week we could be having Roscommon as contenders to win the All Ireland.
Imagine. Davy. We'll get Davy on the show. Well, like Clare bet Roscommon last year. This is a big one now for Davy, like in terms of, you said, the acid test there. Yeah. Clare bet them in Croker last year. Like, I remember Roscommon they drew at Mayo in 2017. That's 6 years ago now. But notoriously, Dublin gave them an awful hiding in Croker. They haven't played well in Croker consistently anyway. They've had one off, like the Mayo game is the last game I remember them playing decent the first round, and then Mayo hockeyed them the second day in Croker. So Davy, look, I'm sure Davy would be interested to see how they get on, and this would be a massive acid test for them, and see if, you know, if they want to get to semi. I've heard this consistently where Roscommon want to get to an All-Ireland semi-final, and this here is going to be a decent acid test. See where they're really at when it comes to the crunch time. But look at we'll wait and see. We'll talk next week, and we'll see where it's at. Right. Cheers, Stevie.
Gentlemen, look after yourself.
Cheers, man. Thanks, man. Bye.